Hi everyone and welcome along to another edition of the Celtic View Cult Heroes podcast, where each week we speak to a former Celt to recall their memories of playing in the hoops. I'm Ryan Marr, and this week we have none other than someone who is also a current Celt at the moment, working with the B team. It's none other than Darren O'Dea. Darren, how are we?
Very well, thanks. How are you?
Not too bad at all, not too bad. Really excited to get going and having a look through your career. It was a great journey for you, coming through the youth academy and making your name and playing in some big European ties as well. But before we get into all that, I just want to ask you a couple of questions about your role at the moment with the club and what you're doing with the B team. You're an assistant coach there. How are you enjoying things at the moment?
I absolutely love it. I came back into the club, it's nearly 3 years ago now. It flies by. And obviously I went in as under 18 manager, kind of lead coach. Spent a couple of seasons there, and at the start of the season got the opportunity to move up and work with the B team, which is actually, ironically, has kind of moved alongside a lot of the players that I worked with for the couple of years I did with the under 18. So from my own personal point of view, it's been fantastic. I've spoken about it before, working at Lennoxtown and getting your actual eyes on how the first team works, and obviously with the new manager this season coming in, who's a fascinating insight and or outlook, on football, and gives you a fascinating insight onto it. That from that side of it, it's fantastic. It's invaluable for me, who's a young coach trying to learn my way. But also with the players, it's been fantastic because I've actually seen their progression right from the minute they walked in the doors at Celtic Park. So trained at Barrowfield, and now a lot of them have progressed up to Lennoxtown. So I share a real kind of strong relationship with a lot of the players as well. And obviously, naturally, I've built a fantastic relationship with all the staff as well. So I've really enjoyed my time this year and the full 3 years I've been in at the club.
I mean, for all those young guys that are coming through and trying to make their name in the game, there's no one better than someone like yourself that's been here and done that. So you must have so much experience that you can give these guys.
Yeah, I certainly would be asking them to aspire to be a better footballer than I was. But certainly I hope some of the experience I had. But look, ultimately, these guys don't judge me as an ex-player. They judge me as a coach, as a support to them. So the trust and the relationships I have with them are solely based on that of being a coach. So being an ex-player, of course, I can lean on some of the experiences I had and kind of relate it to some of the experiences they are having and nearly advise them at times. But a lot of it comes down to how I conduct myself with them, how they perceive me as a coach. So I think the kind of being an ex-player lasts so long when you come into the club, but ultimately now the players only see me as a coach. And you need to remember, a lot of these lads are very young, so they don't remember. They don't really remember me as a player, albeit I'm sure even if they were a bit older, they might remember me as a player. But they judge me as a coach, and I think that's really important to understand that their journeys are completely different than mine, albeit there is certain parts of my experience that hopefully I can relay over to them.
Mm-hmm. I think you're doing yourself a disservice there anyway with the playing career side of things. But let's get into that now. Anyway, I'm quite interested to know just about how you made the move from Ireland to Celtic. So where were you before you were at Celtic, and how did it all come about?
I was originally with a team called Granada, but that was just a local club from where I grew up. I think I was maybe 10, and I made quite a big sacrifice then as a young lad to travel across the city 3 times a week. It was a big sacrifice, more for my family, my mum and my dad, and play with Home Farm, who were kind of a real renowned schoolboy team that produced a lot of not only professional footballers but international players. And it was actually with them that we came across the Largs. I think I wasn't aware of this at the time. I think the head scout of Ireland from Celtic, I think his name is Jerry Reddy, he brought the whole team over to Largs to play against Celtic because he obviously saw a number of players in that squad, in our Home Farm squad, that could be potential players for Celtic. And it was Tommy Burns and John Stevenson, the two of them kind of were overlooking it. And off the back of the game, 4 of us ended up signing from the same schoolboy team. So we all moved over together and moved into the same digs together. And one of them I roomed with is now my best friend and is actually the assistant manager at St. Mirren, Darren O'Dea. So there was 4 of us that moved over from the same schoolboy team together. So it made the kind of transition moving across away from home probably a hell of a lot easier.
You saying there that Tommy Burns, he was part of that move to get you from Ireland to Celtic. So if that's the case, you're not really going to say no when someone like that comes, are you?
No, well, and again, this is why I kind of touch on, the players will judge me as a coach. I say this with the utmost level of respect. Anyone that knows me knows where I hold Tommy in my life. But I didn't judge Tommy as an ex-Celtic manager or an ex-Celtic player. I judged him as a guy. With all due respect, I hadn't watched videos of Tommy Burns growing up. I was obviously from the Republic, who I knew well who Tommy Burns was, but the prestige he's held within the club, that didn't really wash with me. That wasn't something that I made a decision for the rest of my career off the back of, because I was speaking to a club legend. What I quickly found out was the guy was an unbelievable coach, and then the further along I went, an unbelievable man. So he was an enormous part. He probably was the reason I signed at Celtic, but I could make it very, very clear I didn't sign for the ex-Celtic manager or the ex-Celtic legend. I signed for the man and the coach, and he was just as good as both them fields as he was as a footballer.
Yeah, when the club come calling and you make the move over, is that your sort of first real moment where you think, right, I've got a real chance to make it here as a professional and at a very good level as well?
No, and I'm probably the bit that I come out and I speak to the players about a lot is probably going to come out in me a bit. No, I knew I was going to move across the water. I had multiple teams, huge clubs that offered me contracts. I'm going to sound very, very like a joy kill, but the easiest contract you'll ever earn is the first one. I'm not saying it is easy, but it's the easiest one you ever earn. When you're that age, 15, 16, a lot of clubs, they'll see potential, and that's what they invest in, is potential. They don't invest in a player that's a guarantee. So I had multiple offers. Of course, I made the decision that Celtic was the best option for me, and I've just touched on why. Not just the size of the club. Again, that wasn't where my decision was made. It was put in the trust of the people that were looking after me, and Tommy being a main part of that. But no, I didn't come to Celtic and think this is my chance. I knew I was going to get the opportunity, but that was the easy bit. The hard bit is then when you actually commit to the club, then to try to make a career. And obviously at a club like Celtic, trying to make a first team career is harder than most. So no, I was pretty certain I was going to move across the water, but I don't think that was a big feat. I think, as I just touched on, it was 4 players from the one club that came over to Celtic, so it wasn't like I was unique.
Mm-hmm. So was that 2005 that you signed?
It was 2003 I signed.
Okay.
I kind of signed. I can't remember the exact month, but I remember watching the lead up to Seville, and I knew the size of the club I was signing for. It obviously supported the club, but I think when you started to see the first team then going on into the UEFA Cup final, and that team itself was just an incredible side, to then think I wasn't going to be going part of necessarily their team, but to actually try break in. I think that really hit home. You realise the size of the task you'd just taken on. And again, I talk to young players about it. I see it as Celtic committing to me. It was the other way around. I was committing to Celtic because I was leaving home. I was leaving school. I was leaving my family. So I needed good people around me because I knew it was going to be very, very difficult. And kind of brings you back to the very start. That's why I trusted in the best people, and I trust in the very best in Tommy.
Yeah, I mean, when you see scenes like that, obviously you're coming across full of ambition, full of hunger to make it into the first team. But when you do see scenes like that, 100,000 people going to Seville and seeing these big European nights, does that just give you that little extra incentive to drive you on to be like, I really want to make it here as a first team player and experience these nights?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think obviously I knew the size of the club, but there's no point in talking about it. Otherwise, naturally growing up where I grew up everyone's a Celtic fan. There was a lot of, you're kind of a second team, if you like, within the English Premier League, but Celtic was everyone's team. I think the time it hit me, I came over with my family and we went to the home leg against Blackburn, and I was a guest obviously of the club, and it was at a time I was kind of I don't even like the word negotiating, but was kind of agreeing a deal to come and sign. But when I went to Celtic Park, that was the first time I'd been to Celtic Park and sampled the atmosphere. I'd been to Old Trafford. I'd been to kind of a number of stadiums. Obviously, the national team with Ireland, I'd went and watched. I'd never ever come across anything like it. And I'll be honest with you, throughout my career, obviously, I played in a number of different continents with a number of different clubs and some big clubs. I've never experienced anything like it. It's a different. I think it's easy for me to say that now because you've had your experiences. There is nothing like Celtic Park on a night like that, and I think that game, that leg against Blackburn was just surreal. When you're just sitting in the stadium, you realise there's more to it than just playing a game of football. It's an absolute, it's a community. Everyone in the stand feels it as much as the players. And I actually remember thinking, it was the first time I thought I'd be actually nervous. I was on the pitch now, which I always had massive belief in myself. I still think that now when I'm going to games. I think, how did you ever play in front of that? The expectation, the pressure is just enormous. But again, going back to it, you get an education and an upbringing that prepares you for it. So no, but that was probably the moment. I don't think Seville was the moment. I think going over and sampling Celtic Park for real was an incredible experience.
Yeah, amazing. So you're starting to make your way through the youth ranks. You're starting to make your way into the first team as well, into training. Who were the sort of the big characters in the first team at that time, and what was the standard like in the first team in those days?
I'd kind of two kind of first teams that I would have been around. The first one being that UEFA Cup finalist team. They were the first team squad when I came in, and I travelled pretty quickly when I came into the club. Ended up training with the first team in my first season. I went away to pre-season the following season to America. So you're obviously talking Henrik Larsson, Neil Lennon, Alan Thompson, Chris Sutton, John Hart, and all these guys. Stilian Petrov, just incredible pros, but I never saw them as my teammates. They were guys that were the first team, and I was lucky enough on occasion to travel with them, and then obviously very fortunate to train with them. The first squad I would have associated myself to really been part of that, and I was pushing to get into was obviously under Gordon Strachan. And you'd people, obviously, bigger characters might have been Aidan McGeady, who was obviously a young lad himself, but you'd obviously Nakamura, Barry Robson had come in with Paul Hartley, Scott Brown had just signed, but again, a young lad, similar age to myself. And then you'd the kind of academy ones like Stephen McManus, John Kennedy that were around it. So that was a really good group, really good guys. Obviously a very, very good manager, but probably a group as a young lad breaking in, that was a good group to break into. The group 3 years previously, I wouldn't have liked to have been a young lad breaking into that. That was ruthless. But no, I was fortunate. I was around really good people, and I suppose I was around younger guys as well. They weren't as seasoned, if you like, as the group before it. So it's probably more accommodating for a younger player.
Yeah, I was going to say, are guys like Chris Sutton and things, are they kind of tough love characters? Are they? I can't imagine him with an arm around your shoulder, building you up.
No, they were tough going. You just saw the standard of training, and in everything they did, they didn't have time to accommodate a young lad. But I look back and see that as some of the smallest insignificant things were the biggest experiences and kind of learning curves for me. Just simple things in training. I remember a ball coming into the box in a training game and just heading it clear. And I was used to just heading it clear. And I think it was Stilian Petrov and Alan Thompson just berated me for not having the composure, taking the ball down and playing. And I was thinking I'd just defended and made a good action where the level there was just a completely different level than the standard they expected. And there was no, once you trained with them, they treated you as one of theirs. And I have to admit, they were the same with each other. They weren't on a young lad because he was a young lad. They were the same with each other. They treated a senior player the same way as they treated a young lad. They just expected you to come up to standard very, very quickly. But in saying that, there was a softer side to them. Like Chris Sutton, obviously he's told a number of stories about Chris Sutton, and he was kind of one that I suppose took a shine to me, if you like, and he would banter with me, if you like, and make it awkward at times. But Chris Sutton used to give me lifts home, which was unheard of. He would never give anyone a lift home, let alone a younger lad. And I remember coming off the back of travelling with the first team, and he'd ask, "How are you getting home?" And I'd say, "I'm getting a taxi." He'd say, "Where do you stay?" And he gave me a lift home many a time. Actually, I think that's one of the stories. I ended up getting lost, and the two of us were all lost in the back roads of East Kilbride. I couldn't find my digs, and he was berating me in the car. But there was a softer side to them. Neil Lennon obviously became a manager. You can't become a manager unless you have that side to you, a caring side and wanting to improve players. So I just think when you trained with them, you had to come up to speed, and they were preparing probably for a huge game at the weekend. So if you were going to come into their training environment, you needed to match their standards. So that softer side was harder probably to see, but once I got older, kind of looking back, there was a good side to them.
Yeah, but obviously that clearly prepares you to then make the step into making your debut. So I think that came in 2006 season under Gordon Strachan, where you eventually make your debut. I think it was against St Mirren in the League Cup. Talk us through that experience and sort of the build up to that game when you know you're going to make your first team debut and how you were feeling.
It was a bit strange, and again, these are the little things I can maybe speak to the players about now and give my experience of it. When Gordon came in, Tommy had pulled me and probably a lot of the kind of younger ones aside, but he knew Gordon was massive on physical fitness. If Gordon wanted his players to be able to play for 90 minutes at a tempo, but he wanted teams that were able to score late and keep pushing late. So he was massive on players keeping themselves right, basically, and being fit. So that really sunk in with me, and I kind of transformed myself over probably a year's period where I became kind of a centre back, and then I ended up becoming probably the best runner in the club. I was one of the fittest. So I was anal on after games, if I was in the stand or if I was on the bench, I would go to the gym afterwards or I'd be on the pitch afterwards. I was in every day off. I had one of the sports scientists who I owe a lot to, Gregory Dupont, who's gone on to win the World Cup with France, was someone who literally held my hand through it all. He would come in and every day off with me. But the reason I sell that is because I didn't think I was going to be in the start. I didn't think I was going to be in the squad. The day I made my debut was an evening game against St Mirren in the Cup. And I came in the morning and did a running session on the treadmill and I did a weight session. And then when the players started to filter in, and I'm obviously getting showered and getting changed off the back of a session. And I remember, I'm sure it was, there was obviously an injury. It was probably Lee Naylor or something. And that's starting to filter to me, oh, Lee Naylor's ill or he's not fit. But I was thinking in my head, he'll play Stephen Pearson maybe as a makeshift left back, or Paul Hartley. He'd done that once or twice. Obviously, he'd never trusted in me, so I didn't think too much of it. And the team gets called out and you're in it. And I think I did well in the game, but after about 70 minutes, I cramped up in the game. Now, little to be known to the manager on the sideline, I'm cramping up because I've just done a horrendous running session on the treadmill and then done a weight session and leg session off the back of it. So my message to the players, you don't know when your chance will come. You don't know when your opportunity will come. So probably it ended up working out not too bad for me. But if I had my way around again, I'd have been preparing a hell of a lot different than the way I did.
I take it you kept that quiet with Gordon after the game.
Oh yeah, 100%. No, Gordon had killed me. The boys were saying that when they came in. Some of the older heads were, "What were you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I was in the gym." They said, "You have a game tonight?" I was like, I won't be involved." And then then that's when it started to filter. Lee Naylor was out, and the boys knew about it, but Gordon didn't. I don't think Gordon has ever found that out.
I mean, you must have done something right in those 70 minutes, because that was a bit of a breakthrough season for you. I think you played more than 20 appearances, were quite a big part of the team. I suppose kind of standout moments in that season probably have to be some of those Champions League nights that you were involved in. Just before we touch on the games in particular, what was it like for you breaking into the team and starting to become a bit more of a mainstay in the first team at that time?
Now, speaking about it, I'll speak from a side of understanding the size of it and appreciate it, which I'll always maintain. I did always appreciate what it meant to play for Celtic every game, every training session. but I did think this was what I was meant to do. This is why I came over. This is why I moved away from Ireland at 15 years old. At that age, albeit I was only 18, 19, I was hardened. I'd lived away from home for 3 years. I knew the size of what I was trying to do, and I say this with all due respect to the level I was going into. I'd put in the hard yards. Like the work didn't start when I made my debut. The hardest kind of training I ever did was in the lead up to that. And don't get me wrong, it maintained from there, but just trying to break into the team was hard enough, and there was a lot of knocks along the way. So I didn't sit back after my debut and think that's absolutely brilliant. I'm so proud of myself. It was I wanted to find the next appearance, and that probably was something that I had a little bit too much of. I had a little bit too much anxiety, and probably lacked a bit of patience. But that was also a strength of mine. So in the lead up to it, it was inevitable I was going to make my debut in my own mind. It was only a matter of time. And then when I got in, I thought I knew I was going to do well to a certain point. So I'd be lying if I said I was sitting there and celebrating my family. And after a game, and I'm talking about even the big occasions, did I ever sit back and think how great it was. I was only thinking about would I be playing in the next game.
Was there anything that took you back or shocked you, or anything that you felt like after you're making your first few appearances, you think, I need to improve in these areas if I want to be a continued success in the first team here? Or did you find that transition quite smooth?
I found, and going back to it, I found one thing that really benefited me was I was so fit. I was really, really fit. I think people remember me maybe off the tail end of my career where naturally I wasn't as fit, and I didn't have any speed really, but I was quite athletic at that age. And I remember that been something that you needed to lean on in the first team. Obviously, you're playing against very, very good players, and obviously going up the levels, you play against some world-class players. But being physically ready and preparing right, I really saw the need for that. And the amount of times in games I'd have to lean on my physical capabilities rather than my technical or my tactical capabilities. So I probably realised subconsciously I wasn't a standout player, but what I did realise was I could match whatever level I needed to be at. I could match them mentally and I could match them physically. And those were always the two things then I probably naturally leaned towards to make sure we're always immaculate in the lead up to a game. I was ready psychologically, I was ready physically. The technical, tactical part, obviously I played at a level in my career that naturally there was always going to be a much higher level than me. So I think that was something that I learned quickly, was rather than learning on a weakness I had, it was more the strength I had. I knew that needed to stay, and I probably needed to even improve that. So that was something that I probably learned off really quick.
I think part of the amazing thing about that fitness aspect is, as you said earlier, it was Tommy that came to you and said, look, I know what the manager's like, I know what he expects. Like, that just goes to show the type of person that he was, where he took such an interest in people like yourself coming through and really wanted to see you all push on and progress at the club. Yeah,
well, Tommy's job was overlooking the academy. Now, I can't tell you the figure and the amount of players that were in the academy, but I can assure you now I don't oversee the academy. Chris McCart does, and I've no idea how he does it. It's a relentless job. There's obviously not just an amount of people, but each one of these people are individuals, and they've got their own life. They've got their own path. They've got their own issues, their own successes, and you need to be a part of every one of them. And not only that, you need to nearly make them feel like they are the most important. And that's so important for the individual. They feel that, and that's exactly how I felt. And I look back now, and I realised Tommy was doing this for everyone, but I genuinely felt coming through the academy that I was going to be the one. I was the one out of the academy that was going to progress on at the first team. But that's how I was made feel, and I was given the attention of someone befitting that. But you speak to the guys that made maybe some first team appearances. Some of them didn't make any first team appearances, and they'll still talk about Tommy in the same regard, and still talk about Tommy having the same time for each of them, which is just remarkable. Now, speak to Tommy's family, his timekeeping's horrendous. That's probably one of the reasons, because he timed for everyone at any given time of the day. So Tommy did things that like are mind blowing now, that I'm working in this side of the game. Like, to give an example of I was homesick at one stage. I was struggling a wee bit. This is coming back into my first year. Tommy came out at 7:30 at night and ate dinner in the digs and never really told me why he was out. It was just to have his presence there, and we ended up speaking for a few minutes. It was really, really kind of off the record and not formal in any way, but just his presence there. We had a bit of fun, which usually you did with Tommy, and a bit of a laugh. And I just felt 10 times better when he left, but he never told me the reason he was out. But I look back and thinking, he's got his kids, his wife, he's probably been in work all day long, and yet he's coming out of the house at 7:30 at night just for one player. That level of care, I feel that responsibility now in the academy to the players. And the level of care I was given was incredible, but I wasn't the only one. I was one of many. And they all speak of Tommy. You rarely hear of us younger guys speaking of Tommy as a manager, as a player, even as a coach. It was just as a person. And that side of him was just, it was pivotal in me going on having a career, let alone a Celtic career.
Superb. Yeah, it's always great to hear these great stories about Tommy. He seemed like some man. Going into kind of specific games then, I think your first goal you scored for Celtic was against Dundee United in a 2-2 draw. And I always feel like your goal gets a bit overshadowed because of what Nakamura done like 10 minutes later. Do you feel like that yourself when you look back on it?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Obviously a massive, it was actually a massive goal. We were 2-0 down, which was unusual at home. I'm sure it was on Boxing Day as well. My family were over, and I came on. Bobo Balde got a really, really bad injury, which was horrendous, but obviously that's where my opportunity came from. And yeah, we were 2-0 down, scored the goal to get us back in, but then Naka, just typical of him, showed an unbelievable bit of genius. We actually should have won the game in the end. I'm sure it was Derek Ryan hit the post late on that we should have scored. So it always naturally, it comes up in social media now, but my goal is just a kind of afterthought to Naka's goal of the season contender. So it was but it was fantastic for myself, and to be part of obviously the team that got a point, and it was obviously a big point because we ended up going on to win the league that year. So no, it was a brilliant moment for me, but I suppose if anyone's going to overshadow you, Nakamura is not a bad guy. Yeah,
it's funny because we just had an interview with Nakamura as well, and we were talking about his moments, and he said that was actually his favourite goal. But even all these years later, what's that?
Did he do it in English?
No. It was all through a translator. Yeah.
He speaks English, I can guarantee you that. He speaks English. He sit there reading a newspaper on the bus. He's at it.
He just doesn't want anyone to know then, that's it. He's just... Yeah, exactly. But he said all these years later, the one regret he has is that Derek Riordan didn't score to make it 3-2. And I'm like, all the things you've achieved in your career, and that's the one regret that you have? I mean... humble guy, a fantastic pro, fantastic player. Real humble guy. Yeah, but I mean, watching that goal back of yours as well, because we were losing the game, I mean, you head the ball in and then it's just basically grabbing the ball and going. So like, you probably didn't even get a chance to really enjoy that goal, being in your first one as well. Again, you've asked me at the very start of this whether I use my experiences with the younger players. Maybe I do more than I realise. But that was something, when I went into the first team, it wasn't about me or trying to get my own profile up. You were there to play for Celtic's first team. So the first team came before everything I cared about. So whether my goal was, even if we hadn't have got back into the game, that goal wouldn't have meant anything to me if we hadn't got back into the game. And I genuinely mean that. So at the time, I remember the goal, I remember scoring it, and I remember that is your instinct, was to get the ball. We're losing a game of football here, where I'm not talking about Celtic players. I see young players now, and I understand it now and I get it, and it's part of life. But like, players lose a game 3-1 and they're the one that scored the one goal, and straight on social media saying, and they're just to get their own acknowledgement of I scored today. I was there to break into Celtic's first team. I was never about, and I never had the kind of, maybe there is certain level of player, the top elite players, that think about their own individual accolades, if you like, and their own individual goals. I didn't. My goal was to play in the first team. So when I was there, my goal was for the first team to win. So yeah, I look back at that
quite proudly that that was my reaction. And I know the feeling I had in myself at the time was, of course, there was pride, but as I'm running back, you're genuinely thinking, how do we get a second goal? And as I said, if that goal hadn't have if we hadn't have got back into the game, if Nakamura didn't do what he had done, it wouldn't have meant all that much. And I genuinely mean that. Scoring for Celtic means nothing if you don't win things and you don't win trophies. So what means stuff to me was not just playing in the first team, was the moment you go and then are part of a team that wins a league or a cup. So yeah, no, that's something that I'm big on. It's not about just building your own profile and getting your own out of it. You're trying to break into a club, and then what I spoke about, sorry, the supporters you're playing for, they're the ones you're playing for. So no, I think that's important to understand.
I mean, that was a very successful season for the club as well. And going into the turn of the year, we've got the Champions League football last 16. You'd made your debut in the Champions League, I think, against Copenhagen in December. And then it gets to those big games against AC Milan in the last 16. The first time that we'd reached that stage in the Champions League format, you playing both games. I mean, what was that experience like for you? Obviously, you seemed like you were just sort of taking everything in your stride at that age in the way that you've spoken about things as well. And it probably doesn't seem like the type of character you are. It was something that you were overawed by the occasion or by going up against these players.
Yeah, and I do look back sometimes now and think you wish you enjoyed good moments and good times in your life. But I'm very like that as a person. I'm still like that now, where I don't, I'm not one for reflecting until it's actually long into the past. I think I'm better now at understanding when I am in a good moment and talking about maybe earlier just being a little bit more patient and understanding that things come, maybe not as fast as you want, but they do come. But yeah, that was my mentality. The mentality I had at Celtic was, this is the norm. Been in the Champions League, having to play in the Champions League is part of playing for Celtic. So don't get me wrong, it wasn't lost to me the size of the game and the prestige of playing not only in the Champions League but in the last 16 against a club of AC Milan's history. But sorry, it was the norm. It was, this is what Celtic do, and if you want to be a Celtic player, this is what you have to do. So I don't remember being at all nervous. I don't remember the build-up. There certainly wasn't a frenzy around my family or my friends that I'm about to play against Milan. There was no more tickets bought for that game than there was any other. It was, this is another game, and this is part of being a Celtic footballer. Looking back now, you look back and go, that was fantastic. And as I said, sometimes you do sometimes think, I wish I'd nearly enjoyed it a wee bit more. But I don't think you can get to that level and beyond if you don't have a mindset of just always looking 2 days in front of you, which is usually the next game for Celtic. So I remember that AC Milan game, especially the away leg. I think we played Ibrox 3 days later. You don't have time at Celtic to enjoy any moment. The only time is potentially on the pitch at the last game of the season when you can enjoy a league or a cup. And I can assure you, and this first team will tell you more than anyone, you've probably got about 48 hours grace on it. So after each individual game, you've no time to even enjoy it. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that last 16 game, we drew the first game 0-0, the second leg at the San Siro. I mean, AC Milan went on to win the tournament that year as well. We've got the likes of Seedorfs and Zaggis and Gattusos and Pirlos, all these different types of players. Like, we ran them so close in the end, taking them to extra time. When you look back on it, was there like a kind of a what-if moment for you in that team because you didn't run them so close?
Yeah, I remember it was the only game in my whole career I was in tears at the end of the game. I knew what we were doing at the time, and I knew the scale of it for the club. And going back to it, and one of the things that it was ingrained in me, it wasn't necessarily a personal mentality. It was an academy thing. Was you were there to make history, and I knew by being in the last 16, that's a slight bit of history because the team hadn't done it, but it was going to the next layer was going to be a little bit more history. Now, it wasn't maybe going to be something that's celebrated for years to come, like other kind of silverware, if you like, but it was something that I was very aware of at the time, and I was desperate to be a part of. I was desperate to be a part of the team that knocked Milan out and then went on and who knows where you would have gone. Now, listen, we were knocked out by a fantastic side that clearly went on and won it. Probably the moment in both games when a kind of big moment, again, going back to Tommy was a part of everything, was at half-time in the San Siro. Obviously, I played in the home leg and done okay and kept my place for the second game. And half-time in the San Siro, I had a really good first half. And I think naturally when you see a 19, 20-year-old go in one of his first games, you don't know how you're going to cope with it. Personally, I probably didn't know how I was going to cope with it. I obviously would have had a belief in myself, but I'm sure the coaching staff, as much as they believed in me, must have thought it's sink or swim time here. And I think there was a real sense of pride with Tommy at halftime, because I remember I was in the bathroom just getting washed up, and I remember all he said to me was that you matched the cream of the crop of Europe. You've now just matched, for 45 minutes, you've just matched the best in Europe. And his words were, you need to go and be even better in the second half. So that these little things that he was just always by your side. There was no big speeches, there was no long talks, but he was just constantly, I don't know, filtering confidence into you, I suppose. And the second half, obviously, as a team, we had to defend really well. Naturally, that brings more pressure onto myself and Stephen McManus that were there. And as you say, we carried them a long way, and Kaka scored a wonder goal at the end to obviously put us out.
Yeah, I know sometimes with guys like him, you're playing against teams against AC Milan, and guys like Kaka, I mean, I think he won the Ballon d'Or that year as well. So you really are going up against the best players in Europe. And it seems like from what you're saying, you didn't have a moment in that game where you thought, right, I need to match their standard, or there's something they're doing that I need to improve on. It seems like you kind of just took it all in your stride.
Yeah, sorry, maybe in the first leg, I tried to step up in the first leg to catch, I think it was Gilardino offside, and I got caught, and he went through in goal, and Arthur made a really good save. And Arthur told me that he wasn't happy with me after. I remember that the movement, that was probably the first time, it was in the first half, I'm sure, of the game. I remember thinking, this is different. The runs they were making weren't what you were used to seeing. There was double movements and triple movements. And then the second leg with Inzaghi was a really strange player. Now that I look back, even in my career, obviously world-class striker, but genuinely didn't touch the ball in the game. Very rarely got involved. He was constantly just, you couldn't see him. He was off your shoulder. He would probably, if I hadn't been just so aware of the level I was at, he was the type of player that would probably lull you into thinking he wasn't interested nearly, but he was someone that just became alive in the penalty box. So you saw the different sides of the kind of top strikers, but Gilardino's movement, who he was obviously playing in the national team at the time with Italy, that was probably a moment I felt, I need to buck up my ideas here, and I couldn't have been as kind of gallus as I was in terms of stepping out and then just simply running offside. I think he made a second or double movement. I can't remember what exactly it was. It caught me off anyway. And then in the second leg, though, the very first kick of the game, I've never actually seen this back, but I just remember it. So I'm going to try describe it. But the ball came back to me it must have been the first minute of the game. And I was just locked in the corner. So I'm sure someone gave me a poor pass, and I was in the corner of the pitch. And I went to just knock it down the line, and Gattuso ran at me 100 miles an hour to press, and I just chopped back inside him, and he slid past me. And I remember that giving me real confidence. Just that single moment, you're in the San Siro, first minute of the game, and you're expected just to clear your lines, and just by chopping back in and making a pass, it just settled me down. And I think that actually helped me a lot for the rest of the game.
We'll need to look that out and get it in some sort of showboat reel somewhere.
I've never seen it. Send it to me if you do.
Yeah, I'll try and look it out. As you said, though, for you, like when you scored your first goal, different moments like that, it wasn't about the individual moment for you. It was about being part of the team and creating something with the team. So to then go into the end of that season, we win the league. You're part of the team that ended up to go on and win the Scottish Cup. You scored in the semi-final as well. Was that the first moment for you where you could really sort of sit in at the end of the season and try and enjoy things and take it all in?
Yeah. I remember obviously being on the pitch, picking up the league. It must have been the last game of the season. That was obviously, there kind of maybe moments that I look back and think I can not really remember them that well. I remember the moments in games that I'm just talking about. I don't really remember the journey. I don't really remember the end goal, and that's probably the bit I wish I did enjoy a wee bit more. But yeah, I'll be honest. I don't think ever in my Celtic career there was a moment I sat back and thought it was great. I just thought it was the norm. Winning a league at Celtic was what you did. Winning a cup at Celtic was what you did. I probably felt it a bit more with the cup final. But yeah, a league was like, don't get me wrong, we worked for it all year, and the squad worked for it all year, and it was a absolutely brilliant feeling. But it was sort of like inevitable. It was like, this is what's meant to be. And I probably remember clearly what I did in the days after the leagues we didn't win than we did. I remember them more clearly. So think of a club like Celtic, you win or bust, and I think the natural instinct probably is be interested in speaking to, obviously, the best of it is Callum McGregor's. I bet you, Callum, there's not a lot of enjoyment in it. He understands the privilege he's got, but I'm sure he doesn't enjoy it every moment of it. He's constantly on to the next one. Now, I was nowhere near that kind of level, but the similar mentality of when you won one, yeah, you enjoyed it, maybe had a night out afterwards, you celebrate with your teammates, but it was quickly on to where's the next one coming from. So I can't really remember ever reflecting too much when I was at Celtic.
Mm-hmm. Going into that next season, then we go into retain the title as well. But I just kind of want to get your thoughts and how you were feeling in the run into that title in the 07-08 season. We always had the sad passing of Tommy as well. So to win it on that final day of the year, was there a lot of emotion behind that title for you and for the team?
Yeah, well, that season personally for me, I don't want to say I stagnated or anyway. It wasn't through a want of trying. It was the team was doing pretty well. Gordon had obviously strengthened the team as well. So I found kind of appearances fewer far between. So I remember it being a bit frustrating in the first part of the season. The second part of the season, after, like, I can't remember after Tommy passed away. I don't really remember the running. I obviously see it so often now that I feel like I do, but I don't. I don't know if I played after Tommy passed away, and I know around that time I know people in life are got a million and one things going on, and were in a hell of a lot worse place than I was. But I was in a place that probably wasn't ready to play. My mind wasn't even on playing. So in all honesty, I don't really remember it. I remember the night at Tannadice, obviously. I remember the whole squad feeling it. And I don't mean myself and Aidan and Steve McManus. And I mean the full squad, because they'd worked with Tommy. A lot of them had worked with Tommy in the national team. And then you just see people like Jan Vennegaard Hesselink, who's never known the club and only in as a Celtic player. And you see what Tommy meant to someone like that. So Tommy, the full squad felt it, and you knew going up to Tannadice that it was, either way, that night was going to be really, really draining emotionally. And thankfully it was, from the point of view that we won the league. But quickly the emotion of winning the league turned the minute we were on the pitch to what we'd lost rather than what we'd won. And I think you can see that from the pictures. So it was a strange, albeit it's one that's remembered now, and it is one for Tommy. It probably wasn't the most enjoyable one. And I have to say, in fairness to Gordon Strachan, like the kind of drain on him must have been unbelievable, because Tommy was his mate, was his coach. But he kind of had to be the one to kind of hold it together. Like we had some horrendous times as a squad together off the back of Tommy's passing, and Gordon was obviously hurting a lot himself, but was the one that had to hold it all together. So I can't really take much credit in that. I don't think I was much of an attribute to the team off the back in that run in. I certainly wasn't really part of it, and I remember it very, very vaguely.
I think, though, there must have been such a real team spirit in the squad at that moment in time, because one of the real memories for me at that time is after we won the game at Dundee United, and I think Gordon got everyone into a group huddle on the pitch, and there just seemed to be this real sort of team unit and team spirit, obviously probably heightened because of the passing of Tommy as well, which probably helped potentially get the team over the line and kind of push things on. I don't know if you felt that at that moment in time as well, or was everything still a bit of a blur?
No, I think I think that team, we had a really good group. I said it before when I first broke into it. Obviously, there'd been additions, but the core of the team was pretty much the same that I'd broken into. There was a lot of good people in that dressing room. I think Gordon was big on that, not just having good footballers in the dressing room, but good people. So there was a really tight unit. It was a squad that you really enjoyed being part of. Sorry, but yeah, no, I don't think Tommy's passing pushed us on. I think if anything, it just made it harder to have to do that without him. So yeah, Gordon managed it really, really well. I would say it was a very, very difficult time, and then naturally for myself, I knew the external side of it, the real people like his kids and obviously Rosemary's wife, what they were going through. So it was a very difficult time. It's one Celtic fans look back on with enormous satisfaction, and rightly so. And it's one that's always remembered for Tommy, which is a fantastic way of thinking of it. But it wasn't a time that I remember really fondly.
Mm-hmm. Going into the next year, I think obviously clearly one of the big moments where people look back in your Celtic career is the League Cup final against Rangers. To kind of paint the picture for people if they don't remember, it's 0-0 at full time. Game's going into extra time. You pop up with a header in the first minute of extra time, I think it was. And we go in and win the game 2-0. To be honest, I remember being at the game and just thinking, why couldn't you have done that like 1 minute before? And then we wouldn't have had this pain of extra time as well. But what was that day like for you and to score in a game like that? I mean, it must have been amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible. I remember I didn't know if I was playing or not. I'd in the January right up until the window, I'd nearly gone out to Burnley on loan, who were pushing for promotion to the Premier League. And then it was very, very close to signing. It didn't happen, and I actually was disappointed in that because I felt that I needed to go out and play. And then it just shows you a few weeks later you're starting in a cup final against Rangers. So that was all Gordon said to me before the game. I was walking through the toilet and he said, "This is better than Burnley." And that was his only words to me before the game, which he wasn't half wrong. So playing in the game, naturally, my eyes weren't, or my kind of mind wasn't on scoring a goal. It was more on doing my job for the team, which obviously probably took as much satisfaction that it was 0-0 because we hadn't conceded. That meant I was doing my job. But yeah, just a surreal moment. A fantastic kind of cross into the box from Nakamura, and I was really, really fatigued at the time. You were talking about wanting it before the 90 minutes were up. So trust me when I say so did I. But I was really fatigued. Scored, and then it was a survival mode. Then just don't screw up. And I think I came off. I think it was the end of the half time and extra time. But there was a call made at 90 minutes whether I was going to make a change because I'd cramped up because I hadn't played as much football as others. I think the whole occasion, that Hampden pitch was always really, really heavy. So it just shows you just squeezing the last bit out, managed to get probably the biggest goal in my career. So it was a fantastic time. Again, though, it wouldn't mean anything if you didn't go and win the cup. So sharing it with Aidan, who went on and scored in the last minute, 2 academy players were obviously best mates, roomed together, did everything together. That was another special thing as well, which going back to it, Tommy would have been enormously proud of.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you must have, once the full-time whistle goes and we lift the trophy, I mean, you must have been able to enjoy that moment then and knowing that you'd scored such a crucial goal to help us win that trophy.
Yeah, I did on that occasion because naturally the attention's on you. A lot of the times, I go back to it when we won games or we won cups or leagues. I was very much just part of the group and took just as much pride being part of the group. I suppose that day was my day, if you like, because naturally you'd got the goal. But I remember some of the performances in the game. Scott Brown I think he did get man of the match. He was sensational in the game. Aidan was unbelievable in the game. I'm sure Gary Caldwell played in front of the back four, was exceptional. Glenn Louvens was brilliant. So I remember, I remember the squad. I remember the players I played with, and my part in the game was the same as it always was. It was part of a good functioning team. It just so happened that kind of got on the end of a cross and obviously scored the winning goal. So the attention comes on you. You naturally understand the size of it a little bit more. But again, I do need to be clear in this, that we played Dundee. I remember the next game, Dundee United, we played up at Tannadice the next Saturday or Sunday. And I was in the team for that game and we drew 2 each. And I remember we were 2-1 down and you quickly realise that the euphoria of winning a cup leaves and the Celtic supporter expecting you to go again and win another game. And we were 2-1 up down at Tannadice. You're thinking this is a crash back down to earth. You don't are sitting any successes at Celtic. The next one needs to come. So I did enjoy it. I definitely enjoyed the moment. Walk around Hampden, you'll never walk alone. Been a part of that. It's second to none. But in saying that, I enjoyed it for about 24 hours.
Yeah, I think that's a maximum you can enjoy it as a Celtic player, isn't it? It's always on to the next one after that. Yeah. So eventually, I mean, you come to leaving the club. I think you eventually left permanently in 2012. Was it just a case then for yourself of wanting to try and get some more regular first team appearances elsewhere?
Yeah, no. This is the bit I kind of touched on before of growing with maturity now. I've got a lot more patience. I was very, very impatient. You need to understand, and as much as I would have stayed at Celtic my whole career. And at that time, if you had told me that, I'd have taken it. But I had to play, and I'd broken into the national team, and playing for Celtic was the ultimate honour. But my national team meant everything to me. So I knew I needed to play minutes to stay involved and push my way even further into the national team setup. So I probably got too focused on that a little bit, and it gave me anxiety that I wasn't playing enough. And obviously there was a changeover in manager. Tony had been in and then Neil had taken the job. And I look back now and think if I had accepted where I was and just worked the way I always worked and just remained patient, really, I'd have played games. I just mightn't have been guaranteed it, which I suppose any Celtic player saying guaranteed minutes is never going to be the case. And it certainly was never going to be the case for me. So I think looking back, it was a little bit of anxiety on my part. I pushed it a lot more than the club did. And then naturally, once you're out the door at Celtic, things move a lot or very, very quickly. So I went to Ipswich on loan. And once I came back, so I know I'm kind of missing Reading out, but I've came back from Reading. And then when I went out to Ipswich, that was when I really left. I think Neil made a number of signings in that transfer window. Naturally, being a new manager, there was a huge turnover. And I just wasn't part of it. And a lot of that was my own doing, which I don't regret, but I look back and think I probably could have been a lot more patient.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's still plenty of amazing memories and moments for you in your Celtic career. So just to finish off, we're just going to have some kind of quick fire questions and we're going to go through some of them as well. So I think I might know the answer to some of them already. So if you need to repeat yourself, that's absolutely fine. So first of all, as we're just probably talking about, your favourite goal?
Yeah, my favourite goal was obviously the one I scored against Rangers in the cup final. I think I scored maybe six or seven goals Celtic. But yeah, that one stands out by a mile.
Mm-hmm. Is that your favourite game as well, or does another one stand out for you?
No, favourite game probably is a little bit unusual because we lost. Was my Champions League debut against Copenhagen. We lost 3-1. I think I might add it was 3-0 when I came on. So I came on for half an hour, but that was drilled in to me when I signed at the club from 15 years old. I know Tommy Burns come up enough in this, but would drill in that we were training to be Champions League players and not Scottish Premier League players. So when I made my Champions League debut, that was a massive, massive moment because I'd actually targeted that. So just making my debut in the Champions League was a moment, albeit we didn't win the game. I actually got a lot of satisfaction from.
Mm-hmm. Best player that you played with or trained with during your time at Celtic?
I have to say Aidan McGeady. Obviously, there was some fantastic players, well, a lot of fantastic players. But Aidan was in a game was a match winner always. He was just someone, no matter how the game was going, you just felt had a moment in him. And then the bit that people don't see training, he was an unbelievable trainer and ridiculously good. So I grew up with Aidan as well, so I've trained with Aidan longer than I've trained with a lot of players. But he was probably the best.
Funniest teammate or best friend in the dressing room?
Aidan was my best mate. We're still very close now. Our two families are, and our kids are very close. Probably funniest would be Scott Brown and Chris Killen. The two of them were kind of a pair. Now they would have you believe that I was part of that, but I certainly wasn't. Those two were absolutely bonkers. Bruni was just a fantastic character and still is now. Has obviously matured a lot. I'd like to think we both have, but just a wonderful, wonderful guy, brilliant footballer, but someone you could just spend hours and hours with. And naturally with Celtic, you spent a lot of time away from your families in hotels, even at home games you're in hotels. Bruni was always one that I enjoyed his company. Yeah.
Last two. So second last one is best atmosphere you experienced at Celtic Park.
They're all special. Naturally, your mind goes to the Rangers games. Rangers games, I don't think there's anything like that in any stadium in the world. And I've been in a lot of stadiums, both as a player, supporter, now, and I've seen a lot of atmospheres. I don't see an atmosphere that rivals it. But because that was more regular and playing against Rangers, I don't want to say it ever became the norm, that atmosphere. It didn't, but I probably would say that the home leg against Milan, just the Champions League music coming out, standing in the tunnel next to the names and kind of legends of football you were standing against, I think that atmosphere that night was exceptional. But I would say any Rangers Celtic game, when everything's on the line, there's no atmosphere in world football to beat it.
Mm-hmm. And just finally then, if you were to kind of look back in your Celtic career as a whole, what memories do you take with you? How do you look back in your time at Celtic as a player?
I really enjoyed it. And I go back to it, I didn't enjoy it at the time. There's a lot of work that goes on. There's an enormous amount of pressure. You don't live for the successes at the time. You're constantly looking for the next one. But now, retired, and albeit I've got another target, another dream that I'm kind of set off on at the minute. But in terms of my playing career, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it, and I look back with a lot of pride. But as I said, I didn't do that at the time, and I don't think you can do that at the time. But I'd be lying now if I said I'm not one for watching old clips of myself or watching old games. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy when it comes up on, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is. And Celtic fans, someone of my ilk will still remember, and obviously that cup final goal been one that I usually get reminded about a lot. So enormous pride but I would say enjoyment. A lot of sacrifice went into it, and ultimately I end up enjoying it, and that's why we all go out and start playing football in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant, Darren. Well, thanks so much for talking us through it. And I mean, there's plenty of experiences in there for all those young guys now who you're helping, trying to bring through into the first team to learn from. So thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time out to speak to us and go through them all.
Pleasure.